from Georgia is recognized.
I rise in opposition to this bill. I find it shocking to hear language coming from my colleagues across the aisle accusing Republicans of the horrific shooting in Buffalo, when in fact the shooter's manifesto himself, he acted as a lone wolf. No Republican had anything to do with that. I also find it shocking to hear these accusations coming from the party that supported BLM riots that caused over $2 billion in damage in cities and communities across the country. Now, when we're talking about identity politics, we should remind one another that there were 6 people murdered and 62 others injured by a black American who drove his car through a Christmas parade in Waukesha. There was also a black American that shot and injured 23 people on a New York City subway. I'm not hearing any of those examples as domestic terrorism from my colleagues across the aisle, and I don't understand why. I think these acts should be blamed on the people that are doing them, not on people's identity and their skin color. Another thing that is wrong with this bill is it provides unlimited money to profile Americans that the Department of Justice says are white supremacist. That's unlimited money. That's why Democrats want to pursue every single conservative in America, simply because they want to choose who is a white supremacist and not. The Speaker herself has called Republicans enemies of the state.
30 additional seconds.
The gentlelady is recognized.
If the Speaker does not like Republicans' politics and considers us enemies of the state, we all know what domestic terrorist will mean to Democrats. That will mean anyone who stands in their way in their lustful quest for power. This would be parents that are trying to hold people accountable with their tax dollars for how their children are taught, or anyone else that they want to blame for something they want to use for politics. Thank you. I yield back.
The gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Rhode Island, a member of the Judiciary Committee, Mr. Cicilline.
The gentleman from Rhode Island is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong support of the Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act of 2021. We are at an important crossroads in this country. With white supremacy on the rise and violent extremists fueling each other's bigotry and hate, we're seeing an alarming increase in domestic terrorism fueled by this hatred. A recent analysis from the Center for Strategic and International Studies showed that in 2020, domestic terrorism in America was at its highest level since information started being collected nearly 30 years ago. In 2019, Michael McGarity, Assistant Director for the Counterterrorism Division of the FBI, stated, and I quote, "Racially motivated violent extremists are responsible for the majority of lethal attacks and fatalities perpetrated by domestic terrorists since 2000, end quote." We're talking about the safety and security of every American and the targeting of already marginalized groups. We also witnessed just days ago in Buffalo when a self-proclaimed white supremacist, fascist, and anti-Semitic targeted the black community, murdering 10 victims in a supermarket. We saw this last year in Atlanta when a gunman attacked Asian women in spas. We saw it in the bomb threats at HBCUs and Jewish synagogues, and as terrorists have attacked black churches, synagogues, and Sikh temples. We keep seeing it over and over again. Congress needs to act. And we can start today by passing the Bipartisan Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act. This legislation will create offices at the DOJ, FBI, and DHS to monitor, investigate, and prosecute cases of domestic terrorism. A long overdue update to not only help prevent these horrific crimes, but to also bring perpetrators to justice. This bill would also improve and streamline information sharing and training systems between different law enforcement agencies, including at the local and state level, to better our understanding of and response to incidents of domestic terrorism and white supremacy. And finally, it would establish an interagency task force to combat white supremacist infiltration of our military and federal law enforcement, a terrifying trend that we need to combat now before it gets any worse. I want to thank Representative Schneider for introducing this desperately needed legislation. I'm proud to be an original co-sponsor. Thank you to Chairman Nadler for his leadership, and I urge all my colleagues to support this important bill. There should be a strong bipartisan vote to say no to white supremacy and domestic terrorism in America. And with that, I yield back.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield 4 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Roy.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Speaker. I thank the gentleman from Ohio. Here we sit on the floor of the House of Representatives, and we're talking about allegedly crime, but we're not talking about, of the 17,000 homicides last year, the 800 homicides in Chicago, the 562 homicides in Philadelphia, the 89 homicides in Austin, Texas, blowing away the former record of 59 homicides. In the 12 major cities that broke their homicide records in 2021, all have Democratic mayors. We're seeing it across the country. We're seeing the absolute destruction of law and order across the United States of America through the defunding of police, through the attack on police as we sit here in Police Week, undermining the ability to prosecute bad guys. Nobody in this chamber would say we shouldn't prosecute bad guys. As a former federal prosecutor, sign me up. Let's prosecute bad guys. I'm all for it. But we understand what this is actually about. We understand what propping up a domestic terrorism unit in this FBI, in this administration's federal government, what it's all about. Because we saw it in naked display last fall. And we see through all of the information we're getting from whistleblowers, we see in the information that we're getting on tags targeting parents, we see on the empowerment of the FBI to focus and target parents in collusion with the National Association of School Boards, in active coordination with the National Association of School Boards, we're seeing the targeting of parents. And this isn't made up. Scott Smith is an actual father. He's an actual man in Loudoun County, Virginia, who had his face put up as the poster child for an extremist activity by the FBI to target parents in coordination with that National Association of School Board. If you go back and look at the video and you hear Scott Smith's wife crying that her husband was being targeted in the school board meeting because he dared to question the school board when his daughter had been sexually assaulted in a bathroom at a school he pays taxes for her to attend. And then this administration had the audacity to make him the poster child to target parents with the power of the FBI. We know this happened. We've got the information from the School Board Association. We've got the whistleblower's account of the tags being used by the FBI to do it. So, as my colleague from Florida pointed out about what this is really about, it's about empowerment of the federal bureaucracy to target Americans. That's what it's about. It's questioning that you don't think right. It's the extension of thought crimes that is pervasive in this body that will allow the government to target us for what we believe, inherently undermining our fundamental rights as Americans to free speech, to freedom of association, to be able to engage, to be able to talk with each other without having our government target us. If a bad actor carries out bad acts, prosecute him, prosecute her. But you have to do that with police that are funded. You have to do it with district attorneys that will prosecute the crimes. And you have to be honest about saying we need to target criminals for criminal acts and not thought crimes. This is nothing more than empowering the federal government to police thought and speech in the United States of America, and we should oppose it roundly. I yield back.